Good morning. Welcome to worship here in Whitehead this morning. Welcome if you're joining us online. Welcome to all of you who are here. This, of course, is our harvest service this morning. As you can see, it's a little pared back from our normal harvest, but we've done our best, haven't we, love? And we've put some lovely flowers and some fruitery and vegetabliness to remind us of God's great goodness. We're here to worship and to give thanks this morning. And as a little extra wonderful thing this morning, the choir are going to be able to bring us an introit and an anthem during the service. So I'm going to ask the choir now to lead us into worship with the introit. This is "The Earth is the Lord's."
Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and illness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field." I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I've spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me.
Lord of our harvest, Lord of the fields, give thanks to our God in nature revealed. Lord of our harvest, Lord of the fields, give thanks to our God in nature revealed.
Let's continue in worshiping God ourselves, and we're going to sing together, "Come, you thankful people, come." Let's worship God.
Thankful
So here's where we are in the story. After God created the world, and after people messed up the world by sinning, and after God created a rescue plan for his children, and after he sent his son Jesus to earth as a teeny tiny little baby, Jesus was all grown up. He wasn't a teeny tiny little baby anymore. Not that when he was a baby, he was teeny tiny. He wasn't like a miniature sized baby or anything. It's like babies are already teeny tiny. He was a regular sized baby, okay? Anyway, he was all grown up and he was teaching lots and lots of people all over the place. He was teaching them how to love God and how to love people and how to be more like him. This is the story of how one day Jesus was teaching a big crowd of people. On this particular day, the crowd was about 5,000 men. Back then, they only counted the men for some reason. So really, if you counted the women and the children, the crowd would be like 15 or 20,000. And really, we should count the women and the children, especially the children, because in this story, there's even a little boy, and he's a child, so I don't even know why we didn't count him. Anyway, on this particular day, there were lots and lots of thousands of people. Oh, and as a side note, you can read about this story in the Bible, in Matthew 14, or Mark 6, or Luke 9, or John 6. As a side note to that side note, this is the only miracle in the Bible recorded in all 4 Gospels. So that probably means it's super important and we should be able to learn something. Anyway, Jesus had been talking to this huge crowd of people all day long. See, sometimes when Jesus was speaking, people just lost track of time. They couldn't stop listening to Jesus. They wanted to hear everything that he had to say. But come on. All day is a really long time to just sit and listen. And these people were getting hungry. So the disciples went to Jesus and said, "It's getting late. Maybe we should let these people go home so they could get something to eat." But Jesus said, "They don't need to leave to get something to eat. You can give them food to eat." What do you think the disciples were thinking just then? Pardon me, but what food? They didn't bring any food with them. And it's not like there were any restaurants or grocery stores nearby, although that would be pretty neat if there was like a restaurant right there in the side of the hill, right in the middle of all those people. Anyway, the disciples were looking around for some food. Remember that boy I told you about? Turns out this one boy had some food, but it wasn't like a food truck or anything. It was just his own little lunch. 5 pieces of bread and 2 small fish. Definitely not enough to feed a crowd of lots and lots of thousands of people. But Jesus was about to do something amazing. He took the bread and the fish and he thanked God for it. Pretty simple stuff, right? But then he started to split it up and pass it out to everybody. everybody. Whoa. Time out. What the actual crazy do you think was happening inside the disciples' heads just then? What in the world was Jesus even doing? Did he really think that he was going to be able to feed thousands and thousands of people with only 5 pieces of bread and 2 small fish? It must have seemed impossible. But what the disciples didn't know is that when Jesus prayed this prayer of thanks, he was talking to his dad in heaven. And his dad in heaven is God, the one who created all the fish in all the oceans, the one who, at the beginning of time, created everything out of nothing. So making some lunch for some people was no big deal. Actually, it was a big deal because these people would have known the story of the Israelites wandering in the desert really well, and how God had provided for them for 40 years with manna, which is kind of like bread, except it's really small, so it's more like cereal, and it fell from the sky, and boy, that would be super sweet to have like cereal falling from the sky, but it would also freak me out a little bit. And there was also quail when the Israelites were wandering in the desert, and quail are like these tiny little birds. Actually, they're not tiny, they're like regular birds, and birds are already tiny, so they're still tiny, but maybe not as tiny as you would have thought. Anyway, the food that Jesus prayed over and handed out was being passed around, and people were eating, and eating, and eating. And the craziest thing happened. Even though they kept handing out bread, they never ran out of bread. And even though they kept handing out fish, they never ran out of fish. All these lots and lots of thousands of people ate as much as they wanted, and there were still leftovers. 12 baskets of leftovers. What? How does that even work when they started with so little? Not only did Jesus feed these people dinner, he gave them more than they needed. Leftovers. When the people saw Jesus do this miracle, some of them were convinced right then and there that he was the king and the rescuer that God had promised so long ago. And while it was probably pretty wild to see Jesus take these 5 pieces of bread and 2 small fish and feed lots and lots of thousands of people, it wasn't crazy at all for Jesus. It was easy. He would keep doing greater and greater miracles than that, including the greatest rescue the world would ever see. I can't wait for you to hear that story.
Inside out, that the world will see you live in me. Shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. You know me and you love me, you fill me, so send me to shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. Shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. Shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. Shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. Know me, love me, fill me, send me. Know me, love me, fill me, send me. Oh, know me, love me, fill me, send me. To shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. Shine from the inside out, that the world will see you live in me. You know me and you love me, you fill me, so send me. Know me, love me, fill me, send me. Know me, love me, fill me, send me. Know me, love me, fill me, send me. To shine.
Please take your seats.
We're going to come to God in prayer now, and once again I'm going to ask you to turn to the screen and to follow the words for this prayer on the screen. I'm going to ask Jason to play the next clip for us. I want to read to you now just a couple of verses from the prophecy of Isaiah in the Old Testament. Isaiah chapter 58, and we read there these words. Is not this the kind of fasting that I've chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Amen. May the Lord bless the reading of his word to us this morning. Now we have, as you maybe remember, I was announcing last week about the destination for our harvest offering this year, and I'm delighted that we're able to hear from both of the charities that you'll be supporting. I'm very pleased to be introducing this first clip. This is from a group that June and I are personally very involved with, and I'm very excited about. It's a group called Left Side Up, which is a peculiar title, but it's very relevant. They aren't able to be with us this morning, mainly for COVID reasons, that we thought it wasn't particularly wise to bring someone from outside of the environment to be with us this morning. But they have provided us a little video clip just to explain a little about what Left Side Up are about. and particularly about the Reconstruction course. So have a look at this. This is Michael. There's two guys mainly involved. There's Michael Janney Wilkinson and Andrew Cunning are the two men involved. They're both theologians, and they're two very thoughtful and very encouraging people. So have a listen to this.
Left Side Up began in January following a series of conversations between myself and Andrew, the other founder of Left Side Up, about how frustrating it can be that Northern Ireland seems to have such a narrow scope of theology about what's acceptable and what's not. And so we wanted to create a space where theology could be more expansive, more diverse, more exciting. And so we started a weekly podcast called Left Side Up. And each week an episode went up that was either a conversation between myself and Andrew, or Andrew would also record interviews with local writers, thinkers, theologians, poets, and try and tease out of them some of the theology behind their work. As the podcast developed, we realised through messages that we received that the need was so much greater than that for this expansive theology. And so in August, we opened up the Left Side Up training room and office, and since have been using it for a series of courses and community programs. So at Left Side Up, we run a number of events each week.
That's great.
The main one is that twice a week we're running a course called the Reconstructions course, and that's a space for people who are maybe a little bit fed up with the traditional answers that they get to questions of faith, and want a space where they can come and ask different questions without judgment, and where they can share what they truly believe. One of our big beliefs is that sometimes what we think we believe and what we actually believe are very far apart, and therefore the Reconstructions course is a space where people can come to try and bring those things closer together and have a more authentic faith. We also have two community events that are currently running called Proud Parents and Time to Unwind, and we're hoping to add a third called Open Book, which will be an inclusive open Bible study. And so if you want to find out more about those, you can go to our website and our community page if you're interested in any of those events. The response that we've had so far has been absolutely amazing. It's been fantastic just to hear, even from people kind of all over the UK and even into America, just reaching out to say how refreshing sometimes the podcast is, just to hear different opinions, to hear different takes, to just see us dealing with theology in a different way has been really amazing. But for those who have been able to actually come and attend, say, the Reconstructions course, one of the things that's been really amazing is just watching people as they kind of come in and feeling a bit nervous to talk about theology, but then quickly realizing that this is a space where no one's going to judge them for what they say, where even when there's disagreement on certain topics, that everyone in the room is here for the same reason, to talk openly and honestly, and to respect each other's opinions. And so one of the amazing things that we've really seen come out of this is that people have had the permission to say what they really think. And that shouldn't be a rare thing, but often when we're talking about faith and theology and the Bible, we feel like we've got to hide part of ourselves or our opinion so that we fit in. But at Left Side Up, we found actually that people have the permission to say what they really think. Under normal circumstances, we would have loved to be able to be with you in person in Whitehead, but unfortunately that's not possible. But we are still so grateful for this opportunity to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do at Left Side Up. We are totally reliant on donations, so we are so grateful for your support. If this is something that interests you, then please go to our website to find out more about what we do and how you can get involved. You can also talk to Ian and June, who are doing an amazing job and very generously serving on our board as well. And hopefully next time we would love to be able to come and meet you in person. But once again, thank you for your support.
Left Side Up is based in Belfast, so it's not a Whitehead-based group. In Northern Ireland terms, that's still pretty local, so not too far away. Some of our own folk have already been going to the Reconstruction course and found it really helpful and really refreshing, and particularly just a wonderful opportunity to explore faith together with just a bit more room than you might normally find. And that's been a really wonderful thing. It's been a space that some people who can't find a home in the more traditional churches have found that actually there's room for their faith to emerge and develop. So I do encourage you. We are thinking today, as we said, about harvest, and harvest is about reaping the fruits of the seeds that are sown. What we find is there's a lot of seeds being sown, but actually, in a lot of cases, the harvest is not coming through. And this is a little opportunity to maybe to maybe tend those seeds a little and see that come through in a wonderful way. It's really part of harvest. That the prayer that we heard earlier reminded us that seeds that are being sown in us, God expects those seeds to bear fruit. And the seeds of love and peace and faith and compassion are the seeds that God plants in us through Jesus Christ, that he calls us to take responsibility for bearing fruit with those. So we're going to hear in a little while. That's part of our harvest offering this year. We'll be hearing very shortly about another wonderful part of it. If that's looking at the spiritual dimension of harvest, it's not that it's not still spiritual, but it's also got a more pragmatic element to it when we come to look in a moment at Life Hub. But first of all, the choir are going to lead us with an anthem, and this is called "The Goodness of God." delighted at this time that we are going to be able in a few moments to hear from Peter. Peter, as you know, is part of our church here. Give us a wave, Peter. Peter Dara is also heavily involved with the group called Life Hub NI, based in Belfast. And before Peter comes to speak to us, we're going to get a chance to see a little about what the work of Life Hub involves. So once again, please turn your gaze to the screen.
So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Peter Dara, and although I was born and raised in Whitehead, I actually went to church here in Townsend Street Presbyterian Church in Belfast. Now, Townsend Street is based in the Lower Shankill, Lower Falls area of Belfast. It's one of the most deprived areas of the whole of Northern Ireland, and is here right under the shadow of the Peace Line that you can probably just see behind me. Those gates are closed still at the weekends and in the evenings. But my family have been involved here for 4 generations, and I still do what I can to help out around the sides with some of the ministries that go on here. So I received a phone call about 6 months ago from a friend of mine who's the minister at Windsor Presbyterian Church, and he said that he was working with a charity that desperately needed rehousing because demand had exceeded their capability to supply it, and would we be able to support them with some space, because actually a lot of their service users were coming right past this church on the way into Windsor. So we did what we could, and we had a look at it, and this charity was called Life Hub. A Life Hub is essentially a food bank, but a food bank with a number of big differences compared to regular food banks, which focus primarily on food that's stored at ambient temperature, so they don't need all of the food handling requirements. Well, this one does things a bit differently, and it does deal with fresh food. So this van behind me goes out to all the major distributors and supermarkets around the Greater Belfast area to pick up the food that would otherwise go into food waste. And when I talk about food, I mean tons and tons of food. There are pallet loads of food that comes here to the Enterprise Park, which is, as you can see, the church in the background. This is the Enterprise Park that was built between Townsend Street Presbyterian Church and St Peter's Roman Catholic Church a number of years ago as a cross-community venture. And we managed to get them an office space in here and an industrial unit, which gives you an idea of the scale of things. And if you follow me inside, some of the food is brought in here into one of the big office suites to be sorted. And here there are 18 fridges and freezers around the edge of the building, and there's some of the staff getting the packages ready. And in addition to this, there is an industrial unit here where the food is offloaded to pallets and then brought round into some of the commercial chill units that they have, which are absolutely laden with amazing fresh fruit, veg, ready meals. And then each week and throughout the week, repackaged into between 400 and 500 different food parcels, each of which has got enough food for 3 meals for the entire family. So it's absolutely remarkable, the scale of how this is all organised. Recently, Lidl gave an assessment of how many meals that had been procured over the last 3 years free of charge, and it was 45,000. That's just from one of the supermarkets. So all of that food is going to incredibly needy people. So William Booth, the founder of the Salvation Army, said, "You can't warm the hearts of people with God's love if they have an empty stomach." And that's very much the vision behind Life Hub, where as a Christian charity, they really want to demonstrate God's unconditional love to people, particularly those who are right on the margins, right on the edge of society. So that's in particular the asylum seekers, the elderly, the homeless, people with substance and alcohol abuse issues. And each week there is a Saturday session. For the last 3 years they run it, a Saturday session where between 50 and 150, and much more so now since COVID, turn up. They get a great opportunity for fellowship and signposting of other social services, and they get the food bag, and they get amazing pastoral chats. And I have to say, personally, I feel very convicted of my own assumptions about the relativeness of poverty. I had really very much expected that in this nice Western country with a big welfare state that people weren't genuinely hungry. It was just a case of them choosing different lifestyles, and the reality is, I'm afraid to say, that speaking to many of these people who walk for miles across town on a Saturday, often dragging their children with them, to wait in a queue for an hour to get a bag of food. The poverty is real, and it's heartbreaking to see children so excited to get a bag of food with their parents. It really is. A bit cold in here. But in addition to the hub, which operates every week, they also redistribute approximately 300 packages of food through other partners in the charity sector. So these are organisations working specifically with some of the people groups that I mentioned before, and that's been tremendously successful. And being able to step in where some of the other food banks unfortunately have had to close their doors over the COVID pandemic, and that's something that this facility has really enabled them to do. So we are really grateful for God's provision for this project, both in terms of an amazingly committed volunteer base where many of the volunteers are working effectively full-time for the project, through to a donor base which is giving in the most generous way you could imagine. And what's most amazing is that so many of those people who are giving so generously aren't Christians. So it's the supermarkets, it's wholesalers, it's people who see what we're doing and say, do you need a van? Have mine, and handing the keys over. Or do you need a commercial chiller? Why have you got these domestic units? You need big walk-in chillers. I've got one you can have, and I'll maintain it for you. People giving thousands of pounds worth of stuff because they have caught the vision, and that's what gives me so much confidence that God is at work here. Mother Teresa said, spread the love of God through your life and use words when necessary. Well, this to me is a really amazing example of that, here in a really deprived part of Belfast where people are being shown the unconditional love of God, and we're really grateful that the folks of God in Whitehead are considering joining with us in that. So thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for your attention to that. Jason, I don't know if you've got the little presentation there as well. No chat would be complete without a PowerPoint presentation to go alongside it. But I thought one thing that was missing from that little video clip was some pictures of the vibrancy of what actually goes on a day-to-day basis, because we caught it on some of the off days. So the first slide here is just, again, an indication of the kind of scale of things. So if you wanted to slip onto the next slide there, Jason. So this is a typical day where in the morning the vans will go out and pick up pallet loads of food from supermarkets and distributors, and there are, sort of 200 punnets of strawberries, 300 punnets of cherry tomatoes, 200 packs of mince. They all then get redistributed into these big chillers, and then depending on the kind of people group that they're visiting that day, if it's perhaps the homeless, well then we know the homeless can't prepare the food for themselves, so they're given ready meals, so the ready meals are focused for them. If it's a particular ethnic group or halal needs, then again the food is resorted and repackaged according to their needs. Or if there are families, then it's to focus on the kids' yogurts and those sort of things. So it's an incredibly well thought through and caring approach to it. And as I mentioned before, every week there are 250 plus other adults catered for with very complex needs oftentimes. And there's just another metric of since 2017, it's been, they think about 150,000 meals have been provided for. So just onto the next slide, Jason. So this is some pictures of what used to happen on a Saturday, which used to be the main focus of things, where 100 plus guests would come along and go into something like our halls next door and have a great chit chat, a bit of friendship, a bit of community building, and then get the food parcel as well. And that was really important because many of these folks do feel very much on the margins of society, the vast majority, in fact, don't speak English as a first language. And so just the ability to smile and communicate and let them know that they're cared for and that they're welcome was such an impressive thing. And in a sense, that it was a really joyous occasion. But unfortunately, if you go to the next slide, COVID hit. And the ability to meet together in that social way just became completely unmanageable inside, particularly because many of the people just can't follow the instructions. You put a sign up saying 2 meters apart and they look at you in a blank expression, they don't understand things. So we had to move to a queuing system, and this is, I think, where the full dystopian horror of what goes on in some of these areas in Belfast really began to hit me, because we had queues of maybe 100 people forming where they'd walked for several miles across town, dragging their children behind them, queuing in the rain for an hour and a half to get a bag of food to take home with them. That's when it really hit me, and seeing the look on the kids' faces when they were so excited that mum and dad got a bag of food and they're going to get a good meal tonight. I personally just didn't believe it was true until I saw it with my own eyes in Belfast. So it was really a real awakening for me. So on to the next slide, Jason. Then this is just an example of some of the other groups that they work with. So some of these charities may be familiar to some of you folks, but the Welcome Organisation, then several of the wet hostels in Belfast, and in the Queen's Quarter there's about 150 folks who are right on the edge of society. Then Centrepoint, which is a broadly Presbyterian ministry, and work with asylum seekers. So again, hundreds and hundreds of these packages going out to demonstrate the love of God and the generosity of his people. So today on Harvest, I really want to, on the last slide there, Jason, just to celebrate God's goodness and God's provision, how every morning, in a sense, the vans go out to harvest from the supermarkets and bring them in. And what's so great is that this isn't just the soggy ends of the lettuce that you get sometimes in the discount counter at Sainsbury's or Tesco. Some of this is stuff with 2 or 3 weeks of a best before date on it, so it's really good quality food. And the approach that we take is if we wouldn't have it ourselves, we don't give it to our guests. And each one of these 450 people each week that are served are treated as guests and are welcome and are shown that welcome. So thank you again for your generosity today, and thank you for partnering with us in Life Hub in Belfast.
Thank you, Peter. It really is amazing. In all of the many ways that we are blessed, to think that still, to know that still here in our country, there are those who live in such dreadful circumstances, but really inspiring to know that Life Hub is there. A man called Michael Peterson was asked to be interviewed. It was in Canada, and on his way, he got all the fancy treatment that you get whenever you're being interviewed on television. He got a limo that turned up at his hotel. The hotel was being paid for, and he turned up, and he was all very impressed with himself and how he was being treated. And on his way out, he jumped into the limo and they were driving past. He describes how just as he went past the door or the gate of the studio, he noticed a homeless man curled up just beside the gate there. He was sleeping on a cardboard blanket and trying to keep himself warm. He describes the thing that really struck him as he was sitting there in his limousine, and he glanced out and noticed the guy had no socks and no shoes. And he thought for a moment I should stop and go out and help him, but before he knew it, the chauffeur had driven off, and he said it felt like life had moved on. And he went home still thinking about the guy that I'd seen. And I thought maybe I'll help him tomorrow. And I went back. He says I went back into the studio, but he wasn't there the next day. And I thought he must have found somewhere else. I hoped maybe he had found somewhere. He said there was a janitor in the office, of the studio. Just a regular guy, just the kind of guy that says good morning to everybody and always has a smile for them. And he got chatting. He asked Michael Peterson asked the guy, how are you doing? And he said he'd been feeling a bit sorry for himself the other day until he'd seen a man sleeping on the corner at the edge of the studio on a cardboard blanket, and he noticed he had no shoes or socks. And the janitor described how he was so struck he went to a shop nearby and bought the man a pair of socks, or a few pairs of socks, and a decent pair of shoes, and brought them back to him. Michael Peterson was clearly very struck. He remembered seeing a poster in a friend's bedroom when he was younger. There was a picture of a child handing someone a flower, and the caption read, "The smallest deed always exceeds the grandest of intentions." Response to need is not just about what we think is a good thing to do. It's about actually doing it. And in both these areas, both in Life Hub and in Left Side Up, there are real needs involved, spiritual and physical, and they need support and response. Let me read, just in closing, another version of that passage from Isaiah 58. Are you here to worship? Are you keen to learn about God? Do you want to do the right thing? Do you enjoy God's love? Well, get this one thing straight. God won't enjoy your worship. God won't be interested in your prayers if you're only thinking about yourselves, about what a good time you're having, about all your singing and your praying, all your services, all your praises. Even the finest harvest thanksgiving is empty of meaning if you don't care. So help those who are being unjustly treated. Share your food with those who are hungry. Open your homes to those who are in need of shelter, and lend out your goods to those who have fallen on hard times. This is the way to shine with God's light. This is the way to earn God's well done. This is the way you'll grow in your faith. This is the way you will discover God's presence. And this is the way God's love will flow like water from your life into the desert of the world. This is the way to know the Lord. This is the way to experience God's blessing. Amen. I'm going to bring our service to a close now. And now we couldn't have a harvest service. We've sung "Come, ye thankful people, come," and we couldn't have a harvest service without plowing the fields and scattering. So we're going to stand. I invite you to put your masks on again, and we'll sing again. We plough the fields and scatter.
Lord,
pews. If you didn't manage to grab one, there are some more in the porch. Of course, you can contribute to the harvest offering any time over the next 4 or 5 weeks. In fact, as long as it comes in a harvest envelope, we will add it. Or if it comes in an envelope marked harvest, we'll add it. Or if you give it to someone and say that's for the harvest, and it gets to us, we'll add it. So thank you in advance in anticipation for your kindness and your generosity. Let's join together in the words of the grace, and I'll ask you please to take your seats as we leave in the usual manner. Okay, let's share together in the words of the grace. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Good. Everybody sit down, apart from the people to my left, who are already sat down. That was very efficient sitting. You are invited to leave first while Alec plays some lovely music.